Hello and welcome to Lexitecture, a podcast about word origins and histories. My name is Ryan, and in each episode my friend Amy and I bring a new pair of words to share their stories with each other and you. You can find our past episodes and the occasional blog post on our website at lexitecture.com. Follow along with us on Twitter and Facebook at Lexitecture, and if you really like what we do, you can support the show at patreon.com/lexitecture. Today's episode, Only Yesterday. Hi everybody, I'd just like to open up with saying apologies for the long absence. Things kind of got away from us, and as they did that, and as things kind of sort of piled up for both Amy and I, the usual, already not overly simple and straightforward task of coordinating across the ocean to find recording times became not a thing that we could actually do. So we had to take a bit of a extended hiatus there, and that was unfortunate, but we're back now. Well, I mean, I say we. I'm back now, and hopefully next weekend we're going to be doing some more recording together, and then we will well and truly be back. But enough was enough, and I decided that we needed to have something rather than nothing, as people have generally said in the past. So you're stuck with me, but hopefully it's better than nothing, and hopefully we can learn some stuff. And another interesting thing I learned is just it kind of reminded me that I actually do really like this stuff. I kind of got out of the habit of looking up things, and as other stuff took over, I did less and less of the old etymology, and getting back into it, trying to find something to talk about today, it just felt better. It's like, yeah, this is good. I do like this stuff. So that was neat. So without any further ado, we press on. And I've got a couple of words. It's really just, if I'm being totally honest, 1 1/4 as opposed to our usual 2. But again, we do what we can. The first word that I want to look at is the word yesterday. And this, as you might expect, is a compound. But I just sort of, one day it kind of appeared to me, and I was like, yesterday? What does yester mean anyway? And you hear it in compounds like yesteryear and other stuff like that. Interestingly, yesteryear was coined in 1870, and it was by a guy trying to translate a French word meaning the year before, or a year ago, or before the beginning of this year, or whatever. I think we would just use last year. I didn't look up when that came about or why that wasn't available to him immediately, but he came up with yesteryear, which is better than last year if we're all being honest with ourselves. So yesterday, yester and day. It is extremely old as a word. It's an Old English thing. So coming from the Germanic side of the family. In Old English, it was sometimes written as 2 words, so yestran and deg. But the OAD has a note on this sort of 2-word usage. So it says, quote, in early use up to the 16th century, also sometimes written as 2 words, although in Old English and Middle English texts, word division frequently reflects editorial choices of modern editors rather than the practice of the manuscripts. And so that's something good to keep in mind. It's always hard to tell what the actual original usage and forms of some of these things. I shouldn't say always hard. It's often hard because in the meantime, in the intervening centuries, there's always people who have kind of gotten in the way. And I don't fault them or attribute it to any malevolence. I just think we inevitably apply choices. It's like how there's no such thing as a pure translation, because the act of translation involves making choices. And so editing and compiling and stuff like this, and bringing a work from Old English to Middle, or Middle to New, or etc. is sort of translating. So in any of those activities, choices come into play, and the people who make those choices all inevitably, even if inadvertently, insert themselves into the whole process. So what is clear is that it's much more often was a single word, ystring dag, or deg. I don't know. We all know our proficiency in Old and Middle English pronunciation here at Lexitecture, so we do what we can. And interestingly, I guess this is sort of also related to when I'm looking up words, I'm always a little bit hesitant, or there's always a mental asterisk beside those examples of first uses in the OED that are cited as being super early, but they're from a later translation of an earlier work or a compilation. So like if a word first appears and it's dated in the OED as being whatever, 1478, but then there's a note that says that the work that it appears in is a collection that was published in 1570 of a letter, correspondence that was written in 1478. I'm always just sort of like, was it in the original, or is that the same, or is that the later influence on the earlier written work? Or so it's that same kind of question. Were they two words? Was it an editorial choice of more modern editors? I don't know. This stuff is murky at the best of times. But moving on, far too late, I guess. But this is one of those words. It's a little bit like when people say PIN number or ATM machine. And it's because the Old English and Germanic before that word ystran, the first portion of ystran deg, meant yesterday. So it's sort of, yesterday is kind of like just saying yesterday day. So they added day at the end of a word that already meant yesterday. So that's what that is. So I guess if you get super riled up at people saying PIN number, you kind of now have to get super riled up about people saying yesterday day. So maybe it's worth just not getting super riled up about some of this stuff, or get riled up about everything. I mean, what am I, a cop? You do you, but might just be easier. There seems to be evidence that suggests that the word, the original word yesterday, could have either meant yesterday or tomorrow, depending on context. And this is because the OED suggests that the ultimate root of this first portion of yesterday, we're going to get to day in a little bit, but for now, we're talking about the yester or yistran portion of it. And it could either be, quote, comparative, using one of the proto-components of the origin of the word other, or locative, using one of the proto-components of the origin of the English word there. So either the other day or that day. And in both cases, the current day that the speaker is existing in is the grounding reference point. So it's either comparing the day that isn't today or that day immediately over there, and then either pointing forward or backwards in time for tomorrow or yesterday. So the other day, that day, yesterday, and then it gets day tacked on to the end of it. So let's look at day. Day is also a super old word, also Old English, Germanic origins, and it seems to have, not always maybe, but for a long, long time, it has had both the sort of basic uses that we use today, i.e. the period of light as distinct from night, so day and night, and the roughly 24-hour solar cycle, the one rotation of the Earth. So either the 24-hour time period or the not night time. The earliest use seems to be like sort of daylight hours, sunrise to sunset. But Etymology says that the 24-hour period usage was still from the late Anglo-Saxon period. So it's been a long time that it's meant both. And of course, the point in time where the 24-hour cycle begins and ends has sort of moved around a bit in some places and cultural context. It's the sunset, so sunset to sunset. It was for a while noon was sort of the astronomical day, and then at some point it shifted to the other 12, so it became midnight was when it started and ended. Blah. So, and that's of course where we are now. Like one day, if you're talking about the 24-hour time, is midnight to midnight. And then we've sort of analogized that to a day on another planet based on its rotation. So we just kind of go, when you hear about a day on Mercury is 350 whatever Earth days, obviously we're just taking a day meaning one rotation of the planet and applying it to another planet. So it loses the 24-hour time period thing, obviously. One thing I found kind of cool about the word day in English is that it is not related to the Latin word dies, where we get words like diurnal as opposed to nocturnal, or diary. The Latin word comes from a Proto-Indo-European root meaning to shine, while the Old English day, deg, comes from a PIE root meaning, and this is going to blow your mind, day. So that's neat to me that the Latin and English are not related at all. But it's also slightly weird that there existed an Indo-European root meaning day already, but Latin developed its word for day from a different one meaning to shine, which is kind of weird. And another weird, interesting little tidbit, if we're going to dig further into this, is that the PIE root, Proto-Indo-European root, where Latin gets its day, meaning the one meaning to shine, that is the one that gives us the first half of the word Tuesday, because Tuesday was named after, it's the day of the god of, it's sky, I think. Sky, war, a couple things. But it's the name of that Norse god. And someone out there is yelling at their radio or out on the bus or wherever it is that they're listening because they know a lot more about this. And please do fill me in, because I don't know from this stuff a lot of the time. But I just thought it was kind of cool that Tuesday ultimately involves both the English and Latin Proto-Indo-European ancestors for their respective words for day. So, but I'm a huge nerd, so there we are. Another thing I found sort of interesting, we've got one of the things that kind of came up to lead to this hiatus is we've sort of moved a bunch of stuff around in our house and reorganized our lives slightly. We've got some Ukrainian friends that have come to stay with us for a bit. We didn't know them before they arrived, but here they are because their country is undergoing some actual hard times, as opposed to just the minor inconveniences that I think are hard as my easy, cushy, middle-class Canadian life goes. But bring it up because now I'm kind of back in sort of ESL mode, and whenever I'm in a place where I'm having extended conversations with non-English speakers, or at least non-native English speakers, I often become a lot more focused or a lot more aware of how many idioms I use, and just without really thinking about it, right? Because you throw these idioms around, and someone who is in the process of trying to learn English will just be like, none of those, I know what those words mean, but they don't make sense when you put them together. I'm like, yeah, that's really true. And some of the idioms involving the word day struck me as bizarre, just in terms of their age, like how old they are. So for instance, the phrase one of those days, as in a day when things just don't really work out, they don't work out as planned, everything kind of went wrong, whatever. That was only attested from 1922 in an article about the Yankees. Like, somebody had a garbage game and they just went, basically the same things that sports reporters talk about now. It actually says, like, it talks about it could be the result of prolonged rest and getting back into the swing of things, pardon the pun, or it could just be one of those days. And that was from 1922, which seems very new to me. But by contrast, the phrase "the other day." Now, I know we just said yesterday comes from an Old English compilation of roots and words meaning the other day, but this is like sort of when you're telling a story about something that happened the other day, i.e., a time in the past. It wasn't yesterday, it was earlier than yesterday, but it wasn't so long ago that it would be weird to measure that time period in days, so like 2 or at least a handful of days ago. So, but the other day, in that sense, was attested from 1470. I'm not really sure why that seems wrong to me, like why I thought it would be more recent than that. But, and the same goes for the phrase "someday," as in an undefined and unknown point in the future. That's in Old English. It's in Chaucer. So we're 1400s as well, and earlier there. I don't know. Things have tended to get, as a very broad generalization, more precise as time has worn on, right? I think that's relatively fair to say. Like, we've become more focused on minute measurements and precision in stuff like measuring time or discussing time. So I don't know why it seems weird to me that I thought the past would be somehow more precise with this stuff. So there's something for a psychotherapist to eventually analyze if we get down to that level. But yeah, I was surprised by how early those were. The phrase "a day off," as in a day away from work or school, that's mid-1800s, which I guess makes sense because I suppose the Industrial Revolution brought about the idea of work as opposed to the rest of your life. Because if you're a subsistence farmer, or your trade is just that sort of would have been what you did, and the idea of a really hard line between work and everything else was probably more of a foreign concept than we like to think it would ideally would be now. So that bit made a lot of sense to me. A day off being sort of showing up in the mid-1800s. The phrase "every dog has its day," or "every dog has a day," is found in a 1546 collection of proverbs, which this is one of those awesome, really long titles. A dialogue containing the number and effect of all the proverbs in the English tongue, compact in a manner concerning 2 manner of marriages, made and set forth by John Heywood. So if it was in a compilation of, I mean, this is an ambitious title because all of the proverbs of the English tongue, but by 1546, it was common enough to be in a book of proverbs. So clearly it was a phrase long before that, and before, I think it's Hamlet that it shows up in Shakespeare. That's kind of often shorthand attributed to, oh, look at Shakespeare invented this other thing, but clearly it was around long before that. And finally, the nostalgic expression, "those were the days," is vastly older than the theme song for All in the Family. It's attested in the OED from 1826, and was much cooler because it was "them were the days," or "thems were the days," which is just neat. But as early as 1826, people were pining for the days that were allegedly much better. And they usually weren't, at least not for everybody, or certainly not for everybody, but they usually weren't even better for people in general. But there's we like to take one specific thing out of the past and pretend that that was all encompassing and made up for all the other stuff. But the past, as we've discussed innumerable times on this show and everywhere else, the past was almost always worse. So anyway, so there's yesterday, the other day, either yesterday or tomorrow, yesterday day, and hence yesteryear, the other year, the previous year. So yeah, yesterday. The other word I picked for today is "only." And this seemed like a natural fit. It was only yesterday that I thought about these words. It wasn't, it was today. I was casting around and managed to think of them, and I'm like, well, those'll do. Again, kind of cheating. This is a real short one, but I thought it was neat because it's, as we've seen a couple times in the over the course of this show, sometimes the small words are like the ones that have surprisingly, like you don't think of them having components because they're very little, but this is one of those ones that's just a throwaway word, but when you look at it, it's like, it makes perfect sense, but it's just kind of interesting. It's a compound of the word one and the ly suffix that means something along the lines of having the attributes of, or being similar to, or that type of idea. It's found in words like manly or lordly or bodily, daily, earthly, etc. Loads of examples of that, but that ly suffix, so having the nature of one, so that's kind of that only, the only one, the only ones, that's kind of Department of Redundancy department. The word one is from the Germanic side of the family again, and it was originally pronounced as it is in only, so it would have been own. And you can see remnants of that in the colloquialisms like he's a good'un or a young'un, and dialect examples. But the one pronunciation, which should be written W-U-N or something, that came along. It was originally a regionalism in southwestern and western England. Started showing up in the 14th century, and eventually by the 18th century became the standard in the way these things kind of tend to settle down. But if you're looking for more information on that kind of thing, there's a series of episodes of the history of English where Kevin Stroud goes into the regional differences, and how it's sort of interesting to see how normally between the north and the south of England, different ways of doing English were coexisted for centuries, and then just because of geopolitics and demographics and other stuff, one would win out over the other, except for in sort of isolated circumstances and situations. But it's kind of interesting to look at the interplay between geography and language, and how the politics and changing politics of the times affected just the way we pronounce words. So this is one of those. If it had gone the other way, we would not say one, we would say own, and only would be a lot more intuitive, as it is pretty intuitive. But having the nature of one, having the nature of being solitary and unique, is why only is only. So there we have it. Only yesterday. Short little stuck with just me again episode for you. But again, thank you for your patience. Some people have sent messages and emails and stuff just saying, hey, hope everything is okay. Everything is okay. We're doing fine. And we are, in fact, getting back to the business of it very shortly. It has been too long. And so that's where we are. Hopefully we'll get back into a regular rhythm as we come into the summertime. But I hope you enjoyed this one so far, and maybe this slakes some thirst for language word nerdery. And we will talk to you again soon. All right, bye. And that's it for another episode of Lexitecture. To get in touch with us about something you heard in this episode, you can email us at words@lexitecture.com. You can also follow along and talk to us at Lexitecture on Facebook and Twitter, and at Lexitecture Podcast on Instagram. For back episodes and the occasional blog post, visit us at lexitecture.com. Thanks very much, and we'll talk to you again soon.